Well, happy Father's Day, Westside. Hey, happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, to all the father-like figures. Hope you have an awesome day. Hey, my dad's gonna be watching this later, so happy Father's Day, Dad. I didn't get you a card, so hopefully this counts. Hey, love you, Dad. You're awesome. Today's actually my first Father's Day, which is pretty fun. You don't have to. You really should be applauding my wife on that one. But I can't wait to get home and see what my 8-month-old has planned for me. So, hey, can I tell you something that I did not believe before I became a dad? Often when people would show me pictures of like their little kid, especially like when it was like a fresh baby, like Brandon, also like I'm gonna be really honest with you and I need you just not to judge me for about like 5 minutes, all right? Deal? Okay, so people would show me pictures of their brand new little baby and say, oh, look, isn't she so beautiful? Like, blah, blah, blah. And I know the correct answer, right? It's like, oh, stunning, gorgeous, like, never seen such a cute little baby. But can we be honest, like when babies like first came out, like when they're fresh, like none of them are that cute. Like their heads are a little misshapen and they've got junk on them. Like let's just be real for a second. But whenever I would say that, some of you are judging me really hard. I'm getting some looks right now. But something I would often hear from people, I don't know if you ever heard this, is they would say, it'll be different with your kid. You ever heard that, someone say that? It'll be different with your kid. And so I'm a little bit cynical. And so when I would hear that, I'd be like, I don't know if I really believe that. We'll see. Well, last October, it was actually on a Sunday morning, October 17th at Memorial, our son was born, and he had some junk on him when he came out, but pretty quickly, I became obsessed with that little boy. And I think we have a picture. Yeah, I know, right? Now, you're awing me, I'm sure. But I have the cutest little boy in the world. And you know what? I know. Let's stop after that. We need to get some teaching done. Enough awing at that kid. But you know what? It was different with my kid. As much as I didn't believe people, it absolutely was different with my kid. And if I'm honest, I think that's how I've treated Jesus' teaching on money at times. Like I know what the Bible says about that. I know what Jesus taught, but I'm not sure if I actually believed it. Like I know I went to Bible college, like I know what he teaches, at least on like a cognitive level, but I'm not sure if I've always lived that out. Like I know that Jesus teaches that like life doesn't exist in an abundance of possessions, but I also really like to get new toys and to have the newest phone and you fill in the blank for you. But over the past few years, that's begun to change a little bit. I don't know if I'm just finally growing up or what it is, but that started to shift. And I think I can point back to a start date in the fall of 2018. In the fall of 2018, I was serving at a church in Phoenix and not really looking to leave, but got an email from this crazy place called Westside Christian Church that I had done an internship at. And they said, hey, we would love for you to come back and join our team again. And so I was seriously dating a girl at that time. I'm not sure if we were engaged or not, but we knew this would be a move together. And so I said, hey, let's pray about this. Let's see if this is the right next move for us. And let's go to church in the morning at our church, obviously, because like I still need to get a paycheck here. But then let's go back to my house and let's watch the service together. Let's watch the West Side service together just to see if this is a good fit. And so we jumped in, and West Side had just begun a series called Fearless. And if you were around, if you can remember anything before 2020, Fearless was a 2-year generosity initiative to encourage us to give our most fearless gift that we had ever given to Jesus. And so we're getting ready to get married. We eventually decided, Westside is the right fit. That's where we'd like to start our marriage. And we decided to move up here. And as we're getting ready to move here, we're figuring out, like, is my wife gonna even have a job? Like, we don't know where we're gonna live. We don't know how much that is cost. And in the mix of that, we're also deciding, like, are we gonna do this fearless thing? Like, are we gonna jump all in with this church? Like, we don't even know what our income will be. And so we picked a number. We weren't here on commit. We were still like getting ready to move in Phoenix, but on commitment night, like we picked a number. We wrote down, we don't know if we could hit this number, but we'd love to try. And so over that first year of living here, man, God was just so good to us that at the halfway point of Fearless, like we were actually able to up that number. And man, I am so thankful that that was the beginning of our marriage, that we started out with some principles of realizing that everything is already God's and that, man, we cannot outgive him and he is so generous. And that's led us down a path of trying to practice simplicity and figuring out, hey, how can we live with less so that we can just be incredibly generous? And so what I would love to offer you today is some joys that we have found along the way, that as we've been trying to practice this, to live this out, I think often we talk a lot about the sacrifice and the self-denial part of giving, but man, there are some real joys when you actually take Jesus at his word, when you actually believe what he teaches on money, because this is not a series about what Westside wants from you. This is absolutely a series about what we want for you and the type of life that we want you to be able to live. And I think we need this now more than ever. The American Psychological Association stated that the leading cause of stress right now in 2022 is due to inflation and money concerns. Actually, it's this bad. 87% of people surveyed answered that it was the leading cause of stress in their lives. And here's why that's so significant. Researchers say that no single issue has caused this much stress since the survey began 15 years ago. And so where I want to start today is I would love just to start talking about what I believe is the biggest cause of stress when it comes to finance. I believe that the biggest cause of stress, of financial stress, is not living with margin. Andy Stanley says, stress increases where margin decreases. Stress increases where margin decreases. Have you ever been running late to somewhere? You're driving in the car and you have no margin, like you're trying to make it to that place, you are out of time, and something that would normally not like be a big deal at all, like just sets you off. Like you all of a sudden have road rage out of nowhere because you are living with no margin. There is a direct correlation between the amount of margin we have and our stress level. And now margin is the gap available beyond what is required. So whatever that gap is, here's what we're required. Margin is the gap available beyond that. It's the extra, it's the reserve. And the problem is that our world lives with little to no margin when it comes to money. We buy into the lie that a little bit more money will fix our problems. Have you ever thought that? I know I have, that like I could get out of this current financial state I am if I could just make a little bit more money. Rockefeller was famously asked how much money is enough money, and I've shared this quote before, but it's so good, and he answered, just a little bit more. And when we live with no margin, we believe that if we can just get a little bit more money, that will fix our financial stress. But what is actually wrong is not how much money we're making. What is actually wrong is our lifestyle, and that our lifestyle seems to keep pace with our income. And the answer is not making more money. The answer is actually creating more margin. So let me show you how that's true. I don't know about you. I don't know if there's anyone else like there, but I am very visual. Like I need to see things drawn out. Like I need to see a chart. If that's any of you, you're right there with me. The first time I saw this chart drawn out, like it was this concept that like I think I understood, but when I had a visual of it, like just a light bulb came on. So I want to share this with you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw 3 different charts. I'm going to draw 3 different charts, and I want to ask you to be honest with yourself. Which one of these charts do you see yourself in? Because I think we'll all see ourselves in one of these 3 charts. And so all 3 of these charts, all 3 are going to start out the same. And this blue line here is going to represent our income over the course of our life. And now, this isn't a perfect line. This is some averages. But over the course of our life, our income generally goes up. Now, there's some peaks, there's some valleys here. This is This is just kind of a broad brushstroke, but over the course of our life, if you are 30, you're probably making more than when you were 16. If you're 50, you're probably making more than you were 30. So over the course of our life, our income generally goes up. And so here's the first chart we're gonna draw out. Our income's going up, and so we're just getting started out. We're getting that first apartment, that first job, and our lifestyle is just keeping pace with our income as we're just trying to make ends meet. But then we get that promotion. We get that new job that has a bigger income, and so what do? We move into a bigger house. We move into that neighborhood that we want to be in. And then what happens next? We get a raise. Something happens where we get a little bit more income, and so what do? We buy a new car. And so we buy that brand new car. And then we get that bonus that we've been waiting for. And so what do? We take the family on a vacation that we've been wanting to take the family on that vacation. And none of these are inherently evil. There's nothing wrong with any of these. But what ends up happening is that our lifestyle just keeps pace with our income. And when our lifestyle keeps pace with our income, what happens is it leaves us little to no margin. And we live lives paycheck to paycheck with little to no margin because our lifestyle just keeps pace. And it's not a more money problem because if you're anything like me, you're pretty good at spending money. And so I know the more money I have, the more money I am likely to spend. The problem is that our lifestyle just seems to keep pace with our income. And so we live with little to no margin. And this is the best picture I've seen of just why we can live with so much financial stress. When there is no or little to no margin, it does not take much to push you over the edge. All right, let me show you one more chart. All right, I'm gonna show you two more charts. Here's the second. So this one's gonna start out similarly. We're getting started. We're kind of just trying to make ends meet. Our lifestyle's keeping pace. And then at some point, I don't know, this is in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, whenever this happens, your lifestyle actually surpasses your income. And for whatever period of time, it goes up, and at some point it corrects a little bit. And you have every reason to believe that if your income's gonna keep going up, at some point, these are gonna cross. But what happens is you get here and you can't really afford the new car, and so you finance it and you take on some debt. You know you can't really afford that purchase you wanna make, fill in the blank, whatever it is, and so you put it on the credit card, and what happens is our lifestyle actually surpasses our income, and so we're not living with little to no margin, we're actually living with negative margin in our lives. This is crazy. The average credit card debt, and this is average, this does not include school loans, this does not include car loans, but the average credit card, just consumer debt right now, is $15,000. And so that's middle of the bell curve. So that means 50% of people actually live with more of that. And so we just don't live with the stress of just a little bit margin. What we do is we live with the stress of negative margin. I love Dave Ramsey has a great quote. He says, "Very few people act their wage." I love that line. But statistically, I don't know about this room, but just average of our world today, statistically, most of us live in this camp right here. And we wonder why money stresses us out the way it does. But I'd love to share with you a third option. I counted the right number of charts. All right. So the third option, we're getting started. We're making ends meet, new start. And then at some point, something happens. At some point, we say, enough is enough. Some point, we decide that maybe Jesus knew what he was talking about. Maybe we can say no to this myth of more that I need to keep up with the neighbors. I can go to the office, and even though everyone else has this type of car, I don't necessarily need to drive that same type of car. Even though my neighbor got that new boat or new whatever toy to fill in the blank, that I don't necessarily need to come up with it. And what happens is we level out our spending. And when we level out our spending, that is where we start to create some incredible margin in our lives. And so what happens here is the answer is not making more. The answer here is spending less. The answer here is savings. The answer here is creating margin. The real answer here is contentment. Being content with what I have. Paul writes this in Philippians chapter 4. The church of Philippi had just given Paul a financial gift, and this is his response back to them. Chapter 4, verse 10, he writes this. How I praise the Lord that you are concerned about me again. I know you have always been concerned for me, but you didn't have the chance to help me. Not that I was ever in need, for I have learned how to be content with whatever. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret of living. I love that line. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it is with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little. For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. Paul has learned the secret of living with any amount. What Paul is talking about here is contentment. He says that he has learned to live with nothing and he has learned to live with plenty, that he is content. And I love that last verse. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. We sometimes take that verse out of context and you'll see an athlete be like, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Let's win the championship. I don't think that's quite what Paul is going for in this situation. We sometimes treat it like that verse means we have Christian superpowers. But what Paul is talking about is contentment. Oh, and did I mention Paul is writing this letter from prison? Paul is writing all of this from prison, and yet he sounds joyful as he's writing this. Listen to what he said in the same chapter earlier in verse 4. He says, always be full of joy in the Lord. I say it again, rejoice. Again, he's in prison writing this, talking about being joyful. Why? Because Paul has learned that the secret sauce to joy is contentment. The secret sauce to joy is contentment. And for centuries, Christians have cultivated this through the ancient practice of simplicity. Adele Calhoun defines simplicity as the great art of letting go. I love that. The great art of letting go. The great art of letting go of this myth that I need to chase a certain lifestyle. Richard Foster defines simplicity as an inward reality that results in an outward lifestyle. Simplicity is how we learn to let go of chasing the lifestyle of more. Simplicity teaches us that our lifestyle does not have to keep us. It teaches that our lifestyle should not keep pace with our income. I don't know who needs to hear that today, but I need to hear that regularly, that my lifestyle does not need to keep pace with my income. What simplicity demonstrates is a heart change. And we practice simplicity because we want to have hearts like Jesus, because he's not after our money. What Jesus is after is our whole heart. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. And so while simplicity practices the art of self-denial, can I just share with you some joys that I have found learning to practice simplicity? There is so much joy like Paul talks about when you practice simplicity. The first is this, is that simplicity, it roots us in the present. The appetite for more always asks, what's next? What's that next toy I want to get? What's the next car? My car is great until I drive by that new model that I see just pulled up beside me. It always asks, what's next? But simplicity, it roots us in the present, where we can be a non-anxious presence, just rooted there so that we can see all that God is doing around us. We can see how God is already providing for us. That's where gratitude starts, when we can stop and not have to look at what's next, but see in this moment how God is already at work. Simplicity also, it separates our needs from our wants. And all of our wants will never be met. We will never be able to meet all of our wants, but our most basic needs generally are. And this might be one of the best tools for us to start to create some of this margin, for us to ask, is this a need or is this a want? Because I need like clothes, a little bit of food, some water. I want that new TV. And here's the thing, let's unpack that TV a little bit. Here's the thing about that TV. I have a great TV. I have a TV that works. I can watch all the football on it I want. It does everything that I need it to do. It's fine. But the other day I was online shopping for something and saw that there's a new model of the same TV I had and it's a little bit bigger. And I started sending, I don't know if you've ever done like dropping hints. Like I sent the link to my wife and I was like, see, I don't know, I think this fits that room really well. I think that like actually might fill up that wall a little bit better aesthetically. Like I'm trying to sell the things that she would care about with a TV, and like football season's right around the corner. I don't need a TV. A TV is a want. Yet, I still have a great TV, which is absolutely I want. And when we can separate needs from wants, we start to realize that God not only takes care of our needs, he also gives us a lot of our wants. And we start to see how good he is. The next thing is that simplicity teaches us that we can enjoy things without needing to own them. That we can enjoy things without needing to own them. I love the example of creation. You know, I love to go hiking, be out in nature, and some of my best memories with my family, some joyful moments, when you ask me, think of some joyful moments, it's when we're out in creation. And you know what? I'm never fooled for a second that like I could own that mountain that we're walking up or the river we're walking by. I just am enjoying God's creation that I get to be in, that I get to take part in. And this principle, it also teaches us to jump into community. Last semester, my small group, we were talking about simplicity, and several of us guys shared an area where we struggle to simplify is with tools. Because we just like to go to Menards or Lowe's, and we can spend way too much money, and some of you are looking at me like, stop right there, Michael, please don't say that. It's Father's Day. I'm hoping for this, this, and this. But as we started to share and we started to talk about how this was a shared struggle, we started to share some of the tools that we had, and we started to realize that between all of us, we had quite a few things. And we all started saying, hey, what's mine is yours. Feel free to come over and use that at any time. And we started to realize, you know what? I have a lot of tools. Between all the guys in my small group, like, he could absolutely use that for an hour. It's gonna sit on my shelf for weeks. And this idea pushes us into community, which is such a beautiful way to live when we realize that we can enjoy things without needing to own it. The other thing is that simplicity forces us to question what we value most. Simplicity forces us to question what we value most. When my wife and I really started to simplify a couple years ago, I realized for me a sensitive spot was gonna be my wardrobe. And not that I have a lot of clothes, that's not true. I had a lot of clothes. Most of them were all like sporting shirts. I literally had a shirt from junior high soccer. Like that's how bad it was. I had a lot of t-shirts, and you know, I didn't need all of those. I had a lot of shoes that I just wasn't even wearing. And so it's like, I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna simplify. I think I'm down to like 7 t-shirts total or something now. And here's the thing, every time I get dressed, I put on one of my favorite shirts. Because I have had to ask myself, do I value this shirt or this shirt? And I've chosen the ones that I value most. And this principle, it applies to our calendar, our possessions, and especially our budget. When we start asking ourselves, what do we value much? There's joy when we start using our time, energy, our money, and we pour that into what we value most. Man, that's such a great way to live. So let me ask you that question. What do you value most? I had heard a pastor word it this way. And I really didn't like how he worded it because it was a little too convicting for me. He said, show me your bank statement from the last 60 days and show me your calendar from the last 60 days. And I'll show you what you value. I really didn't like that because it was a little bit too convicting because I know what the right answer is. Like when someone says, what do you value most? Like you know what you should say, right? But I know that my bank statement, my calendar doesn't always reflect that. So what now? What do we do with all of this? As we are creating margin, as we're practicing simplicity, what should all of this look like? The first thing that we have to do as we're creating this margin, we're practicing simplicity, is that we save consistently. But what we do here is we start to save. We find ways to create margin because this is not going to create itself, and we begin to save. And we start to create margin for when life inevitably happens. We know that life will happen. We know that these expenses will come. And so we start to create margin so we're not living with little to no margin. We start to save. I love what Proverbs chapter 22 says. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precaution. The simpleton goes blindly and suffers the consequences. Eddie shared last week that one study found that many young adults spend more on coffee than on savings. I found another study this week that said 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck and they will use debt to cover emergencies. And so emergencies will happen. Life will happen, and when we live with little to no margin and we don't set any money aside, man, it just sets us up for disaster. It sets us up to have to get into more and more debt, and there is no greater enemy to saving than debt. And saving is really the path to financial freedom. When we have minimal or negative margin, it does not take much to push us over this edge. And so we slowly begin to create some of this margin and starting wherever you're at. Some of you are thinking this like, I have no margin to save. We start to make sacrifices. We start to live simply, and we take that money and we're prudent with it. Like Proverbs says, we're not the simpleton, and we start to put some of that away. Now, I have to stop here and warn you that this is different than hoarding. This is different than what the Bible talks about of storing up earthly treasures. Proverbs 11 verse 28 says, those who trust in their riches will fall, but the righteous will thrive like a green leaf. And this is different because we are a people on a mission. We are living in a way where we're saying we're saving, we're creating some financial freedom, but we're doing it with a kingdom mindset. And I want to live in a way now where my sacrifice now can produce kingdom work later. This is different than hoarding because I'm not building up my own wealth. I'm creating some margin, but I'm doing it so that I can be a blessing to others. I love in the Old Testament the story of Abraham, where Abraham was incredibly blessed, and God said to him, like, don't just be blessed. You are blessed so that you can go and be a blessing. I led a mission trip about 5 years ago to the Philippines. And we served for a whole week doing this like VBS. It was a lot of fun. And we had these teenagers that served all day with us. And towards the end of the week, one of the missionaries came to us and said, hey, some of the teens would love to take you guys and show you where they live. And we said, absolutely, like we would be honored, we would love to go. And so they took us to where they lived, and they lived in a pretty rough area. They lived in some slums. The houses they built looked like they would be blown over if like a small wind come. They weren't really houses, they were little shacks. One of the families shared with us that whenever it would rain, it would fill up to like 6 to 12 inches of water, and they would all just sleep on this little loft upstairs, and it just wrecked us. And so my team, afterwards, we came back and we huddled in a little restaurant and we were talking about it, and there was just some pretty raw emotions. There was a lot of tears, there was a lot of guilt, there was a lot of questioning, like what are we doing with our lives? And where we landed that day after some really good discussion was that, man, God has blessed us. And we can see that as, yeah, I'm blessed. I can live a comfortable life now. Or we can say, man, I am blessed to go and be a blessing, as he told Abraham. I can see everything as God's, and I'm a manager. I'm going to be financially responsible, but I want to live an outrageously generous life. I want to live with the kind of financial freedom that if someone says, hey, I'm going on this mission trip, I could use some support, I can write that check without even hesitating. I can say, yeah, I have sacrificed now so that I can be outrageously generous down the road. And let me tell you something, we are a part of an incredibly blessed church. And one of the many reasons that this church is incredibly blessed is because we stand on the shoulders of generations that have been outrageously generous followers of Jesus and have lived sacrificial lives so that they could live a generous life. And I have to tell you that I hope and pray that my generation, that we will live and that we will give as sacrificially as those that came before us, because I want to see this mission continue. I want to live a life that when an opportunity pops up for our church to be generous, for me to be generous, that none of us hesitate. And we are known as a people of love. We are known as a people that serve wholeheartedly because our whole heart belongs to Jesus. We're not building up wealth for ourselves. We're building up wealth because we want Jesus to have it all. So how do we get there? How do we get to that point? Well, I'd love to present with you this very, very simple plan. I loved Eddie said last week, God blesses a financial plan that prioritizes him. And so I'm going to illustrate it this way. Got some mason jars. I have some golf balls. There are 10 golf balls in here. Each one of these represents 10% of our income. And this is a really simple model, but it is tried and true. And so this is our entire income. The very first thing we do, and this is called the 10-10-80 plan, the very first thing we do is we take our very first 10% and we say that everything is yours, God. And so I just want to be obedient. I'm going to give you my first fruits. I'm going to give to you first, and I'm going to take the very first 10% I earn, and I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to give a tithe to the church. I'm going to give first and foremost to Jesus. I don't know if you caught this gem that Eddie said a couple weeks ago, but he said, though tithing begins as an act of obedience, it becomes an act of joy. And we give our first and best offering to God the way the Bible teaches. Now, I have to be really honest with you, church. I grew up learning this. Like my parents even had some like envelopes when they give us like allowance growing up, and we'd learn to put like 10% here, 10% here, 80% here. We like learned to do this. I've worked in a church my entire adult life, but can I be like very transparent that I've done this step most of my life out of obligation, out of realizing like it's what I'm supposed to do. And so here's my 10%. I've done my duty, check the box, move on. And it wasn't until a couple years ago that I felt like that's not the heart God wants. That's not how God wants me to approach this. And so we decided to try something fun in our family, and it is a practice that has stuck with us since. It's a highlight for us. You're welcome to steal this. I'm sure it's not original, but we started this thing in our house called So Blessed Dinner. And we have So Blessed Dinner every month on the 15th, which is where we get our first paycheck of that month. So we schedule So Blessed Dinner every single 15th of the month. And here's what we do at So Blessed Dinner. It is not complicated at all. We cook a really good meal. We eat dinner together. And we spend the first part of our meal just sharing how good God has been to us over the past month. We share whether it's financial blessings, whether it's relationships that have been such a blessing to us. We share about how good our community has been to us. We share about how we've seen God moving in and through us and in and through our church here at Westside. And we just share how we live lives that really are so blessed. And after we share for a while about how good God has been to us, I take out my phone and I give my tithe electronically to Westside right then and there. And I love this rhythm because we give out of a place of gratitude now. When the atmosphere has shifted, I no longer feel when we're doing that like it's out of obligation. It's realizing, man, God, you have been so good to me. I can't wait to just start this month by giving you a little bit back. You deserve all of it. Let me just follow with some obedience. And I think that's where it starts to move to joy. So we start by giving first and foremost to Jesus. The next thing that we're going to do in this 10-10-10 plan is we're going to save consistently. If I could get this out of here. We're going to save consistently. We're going to live a disciplined life to consistently save, to begin to create this margin, begin to create some financial freedom when life happens, that we don't have to be stressed out all the time, because margin and stress are directly correlated. And so we must choose carefully how we will manage our money. And so the final step in this, so that the 80%, is that we say, I will live off the rest. I'm going to give 10 here to God. I'm going to save 10, create some margin, and I'm going to live off the rest. We practice simplicity so that we can live off this rest. And this isn't easy. I think this model, the only drawback is that it makes it seem a little bit easier than it actually is. And so I want to talk to two groups of people really quickly. The first group I want to talk to is anyone that looks at this and thinks, there is no way I could get there. There is no way I could get to 10% here, 10% here, and then just live off the 80. Here's what I would tell you. Start right where you're at. Don't wait to start doing this. Start just putting in what you can. Start to put a plan together tonight. If you're not even sure how to start to put a plan together, that's fine. We actually have financial coaches out in the lobby at the resource area that are wanting to meet with you. They will help you put a plan together. They will help you figure out how to get there. Last week, Eddie shared that God honors a plan that honors him. When I was a resident here, in my early 20s, Eddie preached a sermon that has just stuck with me ever since. He was talking about giving, and he brought this big ladder out on stage. Some of you were probably here to remember this, but he brought this ladder out, and every rung of the ladder had a next step in our giving. And the way Eddie framed it all up that week is that giving is a journey, and we're constantly like shedding that next layer and growing that generosity muscle. And we're becoming more and more generous people as Jesus is going after our whole heart. And so wherever you're at, just figure out what is your next step in generosity. Don't wait till you have the margin to do it. That's not how this works. You have to start by just figuring out where you're at. What can I give now? How can I take my next step in generosity? And God will honor that plan over time. Second group of people that I'd love to talk to is this. Some of you are looking at this and you're saying, I'm already there. Like, this is how I live my life. First of all, great. That's incredible. Thank you for being an example to all of us. But can I challenge you to ask something that's a dangerous question to ask? Ask God, what's next? If giving is a journey, it's a muscle that we are growing, what is next for me and my family? How can I continue to live an outrageously generous life? Because I never want to stop asking God what he has for me. I never want to stop asking God if there's an area of my heart that needs to be exposed and needs to be reformed and be more like him. So what is next for you? How can you continue to live the life, the path that you're already on? And the last thing is this: it will cost something. But while these concepts are simple, they are anything but easy to live out. And it is so opposite of what our world does that we really have to deform from the way our world teaches us to handle money and really be formed by the way of Jesus. I love the story in the Old Testament of David. David has sinned. There's a plague against Israel. And to make a really long story short, you should go read this tonight, but it's in 2 Samuel chapter 24, the end of the book. David has to offer an offering to end this plague for his nation. And so David goes to offer this offering, and while he's on the way, he meets this guy who offers basically to cover the offering. Like, he wants to encourage this offering, David's offer, so he says, here, you can take an animal to sacrifice, the threshing floor that you were planning on buying from me, so you could offer a sacrifice there. That's covered, don't worry about it, just go offer this offering. And David, oh man, David's response is incredible. I have to read this for you. He says, no, I insist on buying it. I will not present a burnt offering to my Lord that has cost me nothing. I will not present an offering that has cost me nothing. And this journey will require sacrifice. It will require a level of self-denial, but we will learn contentment along the way. We will learn to live like Paul, where we can kind of live that life where we're in prison and we're writing joyful thank you notes to a church. When we learn to practice simplicity and create margin by savings, to live a life that's not about what we can get, how much we can receive, about more and more and more. It's about what we can give, about how we can bless others. Man, that's some of the good stuff of following Jesus. To follow after Jesus with everything we have, to say, Jesus, I want you to have my whole heart. I'm holding nothing back. I love how Eddie has ended the past couple of weeks, where he's invited us just to spend a moment with God. And so we're just going to take a moment of silence and dare to ask this question: God, what would you have me do? God, what would you have me do with all of this? So I'm going to start us out, give us a moment to be silent, and then I'll close us in prayer. So God, we all pray right now, what would you have me do?